We are watching as Ukraine carries out some of its most complicated, complex, and deepest strikes of this entire war. These are not one-offs. These are kill shots aimed at the very heart of Russia's war economy. Look at the targeted attacks at the Orenburg Oil Refinery. Look at the attack at the Berezniki chemical complex. The refinery, that's 1,500 kilometers, 930 miles, from Ukraine. It processes 6.6 million metric tons of crude per year. That's 7.2 million short tons. Its output is what they need to keep the country running, whether it's the civilian market or the military logistics. And not having this refinery is putting Russia into the red. But look at the other attack, the one at the Berezniki Azot. That lies about 1,700 kilometers or 1,000 miles from Ukraine. The Azot plant produces ammonia, carbonide, ammonium nitrate, and other core materials that are necessary to create fertilizer and explosives. Now that Ukraine has successfully struck those facilities, there's going to be shortages across Russia. Russia's ability to create what it needs to wage war has just become much more complicated. And the good news about that is that things are getting even worse. Because the entire national supply chain today, following the attack at the Berezniki Azot, it is going to become much more complicated than ever before. But what makes this really fascinating is that Ukraine, it didn't do what you thought. It did not use flamingos to attack these facilities. It used something different. Ukraine has many more tricks up its sleeves than you can possibly imagine. And what we're seeing now is just the prelude to something much bigger about to happen. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kyiv Post and a national security advisor. Ukraine is at this point not saying how they carried out the attack. However, the 14th Regiment has said that in fact it was AN-196 Luti drones that were used to attack the facilities inside of Russia. These drones are amazing. They can go 1,500 kilometers or 930 miles. They can currently attack across Russia. And these attacks are going deeper and deeper every time. Ukraine is starting to learn how the game works, how to get around Russia's air defense. Russia continues to attack Ukraine, and it changes nothing. The war is no closer to ending, certainly not in a way that will be favorable to Russia. However, Ukraine's not interested in doing these sorts of stunts. Ukraine is interested in going after things such as the pump hubs, the fertilizer plants, the refineries, the things that Russia needs to continue operating as a country. But now, logistics are fraying faster than the repairs can close the gaps. And September has showed us that already. We saw that there was 19 Russian energy facilities that were struck just in 1 month. Go through the list. It's incredible. Ryazan, Saratov, Kirovsky, Novokobeyevsk, Astrakhan. One after another, Russian facilities were destroyed. Refineries, depots, gas plants, pumping stations, they were all hit. And each strike is forcing repairs. It's forcing rerouting. It's forcing emergency drawdowns. But it's also done something else. Now that roughly 38% of refining capacity has been taken offline, that means that there are outages across Russia. This means across Russia, the people know what is happening. Moscow's public spin cannot hide the mounting shortages. And we see that across the country, they're putting limits on everybody. Now you can only buy about 8 gallons or 30 liters of diesel at a time. There's strong concerns within Moscow that there's going to be panic buying. And there is. They're trying to figure out how they can control a population that's terrified, that realizes that every day there's going to be less supply of gasoline. But the government can't really do very much. The fact is that the people can see the writing on the wall. They know that the government has already banned the export of gasoline. But that doesn't really fix the huge holes. The fact that there's simply a lack to do things like supply the tanks that Russia has, to keep its infantry on the move. All these sorts of vehicles that the military uses, they guzzle gasoline. They guzzle diesel. They are not ones that are very environmentally friendly. But as a result of this, Russia needs a lot of fuel. But fuel it does not have. So that leads to a different question. Because there's no fuel, is that the reason that just earlier this year, about half of frontline vehicles of the Russians were armored? However, today, it's under 10% of frontline vehicles that are armored. Tanks represent only about 4% of assaults. More than 90% of assaults now use unarmored platforms. Pickup trucks, vans, quad bikes, motorcycles, and golf carts. The Russians are left to golf carts. That is the current state of the Russian military. That's how things are going for the world's second greatest army. It is a total disaster. Drones are reshaping the entire geometry of war. The battlefield is in the hands of Ukraine. Ukraine sets up kill zones and makes sure that the Russians will not pass them. And the Russians take huge losses and gain nothing. The Russians, what can they do though? They can do very little. They can only attack civilians. They can kill journalists. They can kill people who are there to work as the Red Cross. But they cannot in any way advance inside Ukraine. That's becoming very clear. But now Ukraine's got something else on its side. Ukraine has got more missiles, more technologies, more drones. And in fact, there's organizations working today to make sure that Ukraine has the drones that it needs. And I'll pin in the first comment below a means to donate by PayPal or by bank transfer to an organization that's helping to get the Ukrainian soldiers life-saving drones. And for those of you who have not already seen the video, there's a pretty amazing video of the drones which we help contribute to, which are now being used to defend Ukraine, to take out Russian drones. It's pretty amazing to think this is partially due to our work, to your contributions, something for which I greatly thank you, as do the men on the front. But for those who are also interested in helping Ukraine in another capacity, especially those from a technical background, or those who have a science background, you are asked to please check out the link in the first comment below, which I have pinned there with information about donating to drones. There is an organization, Technology United for Ukraine, which is linking up scientists from around the world and those from the backgrounds in the sciences to be able to use their skills, their talents to help Ukraine, to volunteer your knowledge. So if you're interested, please check out that link. So Russia, at a total loss as to what to do, it's trying to find solutions. How can it get things back online? How can it get back to producing enough fuel for their country? It's alleged at this point that the prime minister, on a daily basis, is having multiple meetings on this topic. Yet we see that it's not changing anything. The fact is, they cannot stop Ukrainian drones. It's that simple. There's nothing else to understand. There is nothing they can whip up quickly. Though they are trying. For instance, they're looking at going back to using MMA, which is an additive that's used sometimes to create fuel. However, they banned it back in 2016 because it also causes cancer. But the fact that they're looking at going back to using these chemicals, things that are probably not very good for their country in the long run, shows the incredible desperation that exists within Russia. Russia's budget is totally dependent on oil. 40 to 45% of their budget comes from oil and gas. And today, that is becoming a serious problem. So many do ask, why is Russia so dependent on oil and gas? Why didn't it develop more? And the answer is so very simple and so incredibly tragic. It's because of Vladimir Putin. So you see, after 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was optimism that maybe Russia too could become a normal country. It could become democratic. It could become European. But the rise of the Putin regime, following the 1990s, which were filled with violence, never allowed that. They embezzled everything. They stole absolutely everything inside the country. And in fact, what we see today, the decisions being made, they don't reflect what is in the interest of Russia, quite obviously. They reflect what is in the interests of various oligarchs and other branches that wish to make a profit. So when you consider why the military has such incredible expenditures on things that just don't make sense, rest assured, there's no way to understand it rationally. Only if you understand that those expenditures typically are not there to help the Russian soldiers. They are there so that somebody can embezzle the money. Now, of course, since we support Ukraine, we are delighted to see this, and there's no complaint. But for Russia itself, it cannot fathom why it's losing, how it reached this point. But it is really all very simple. It's because they chose corruption. They chose to put their self-interest ahead of the nation's interest. They put their family cliques ahead of what the men on the front need. And that's why Russia is losing. That's why Russia will lose. At no point has Russia been so weak, probably since 1991, immediately after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Since then, it was rebounding. But today, the weakness, the actual structural weakness, where the country could very realistically just implode, it's there. We've reached that time. So, looking ahead, in the next weeks and months, there is more good news coming out. There's more good news of how Ukraine is taking back territory. There's more good news about how Russia's engine, its economy, is seizing up due to a lack of fuel. Russia is having a tremendously difficult situation. So today, the Kremlin doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have soldiers that are trained for war, and its officers were only trained in how to gauge corruption, something that operates just like the rest of the Russian government. And that's how we should understand the drone scares inside of Europe. Europe's drone scare was the flare while the fire burned inside Russia's fuel and fertilizer networks. Their military doesn't have any other solutions. Let's just send some drones in Europe and see if that will distract them. Ukraine is not merely adapting to modern warfare. Ukraine is writing the manual for modern war, and it's doing it in real time. We are watching it happen. It is doing this at long range with systemic effect. Starve the engine, and you stop the army. Stop the army, and you end the lie. You defeat the enemy. And when you look at the bestiality of this Kremlin, that's only interested in wealth and making sure that it deprives others, that it mistreats humans as no different than a disposable good, it's surprising that they even agree to give back, as they just have, 185 Ukrainian prisoners of war. Each one of these men is a hero. He was returned with his name. He is not a statistic. And every one of these exchanges reminds us who is paying the price for this terrible war. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. And as always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.